The Construction Record is brought to you by the BC Construction Safety Alliance.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 94 of the Construction Record podcast. This is Vince Versace, National Managing Editor of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce, joining you today. In today's episode of the Construction Record, we feature a great conversation that I had with Stewart Carroll, President of Beck Technology. I wanted to talk to Stewart about construction leadership in the COVID-19 era. For our listeners and readers, you know this is a topic we've been covering on and off since the pandemic started, and we keep finding some really valuable insight with every conversation or story we have on this topic. From my conversation with Stewart, here's one nugget I want to share with you before we go to the actual interview. This nugget struck me as something that is really insightful to the way Stewart approaches things, and it also kind of lays out the basic groundwork of what we all should be trying to do as we work with our staff and work with our teams during unprecedented times. Here's what Stewart said. Be able to articulate where you ultimately want to be as a business. It is sort of like the GPS, the map. If you do not know the destination, you'll never get there. I firmly believe understand where you want to get to, help your own employees understand where you want to get to, and then control day in and day out what you want to get done tomorrow and not worry about the things you can't control. Sounds like some basic, clear advice, but I would venture to guess that many of us kind of forget some of this during these unprecedented and overwhelming times. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Stewart Carroll of Beck Technology. Here we go.
This feature interview is brought to you by the Greater Toronto Sewer and Water Main Contractors Association, building water and sewer infrastructure excellence since 1957.
Hello, everyone. This is Vince Versace, National Managing Editor of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce, joining you today for an exciting discussion with Stewart Carroll of Beck Technology. He's the president at Beck. And I'm going to let Stewart introduce himself. Stewart, say hello to our listeners.
Yeah. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks, Vince, for inviting me to participate today. Excited to have a good conversation with you. I enjoyed the pre-conversation. So yes. I'm sure I'll enjoy the post-conversation as much.
For sure. As our loyal listeners know, I always talk about the green room chat that I have with the guests beforehand. And, the Skittles are out, the good bubbly water, which is all G-rated and above board, just carbonated water. We discuss a little bit what we want to talk about. And I had a really treat and a good conversation with Stewart. And so thank you for that, Stewart, ahead of time. It sets a good tone for us. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And what I wanted, while we have Stewart with us on the Construction Record this time, is, as some of our listeners know, we've been exploring this concept of construction leadership in the era of COVID. It's not a definite thing, as we're learning with every guest that we talk about. It seems to be something that has to be malleable, something that has to be customizable. And we're looking for insight from leaders in the industry and how they're doing that within their own business practices. Because as we all know, in construction, whether in Canada or the US, up to 70 to 80% of the people participating in this wonderful industry that builds the world we enjoy, we're talking about small mom and pop shops, 1 to 20 employees. So how do you build culture? How do you manage and lead in a time when it's just plain scary out there for some folks? So we're hoping to get some insight from Stewart. So maybe that's how we'll start, Stewart. How has, the leading of your staff and coordinating and communicating with them in this era of this pandemic worked out for you thus far?
Yeah, so maybe just for context for those that are listening. So I lead a company. It is technology based, servicing the pre-construction sector of the construction industry. We're a little bit different than a lot of technology based companies in the sense that we were born from industry. So we have a sister company, the Beck Group, that designs and builds capital projects across the southern states of the United States. Culture for us has always been important from the very beginning. So we're celebrating our 24th year in business as Beck Tech. Our sister company's been around about 108 years. So, we're definitely not a new company. But as Vince, you and I were talking about, in the green room, one of the big things for us as to why culture is important is we very much have a vision for what the end goal is for Beck Tech. It has nothing to do with money. Has everything to where we want to take the industry. So our mission statement is revolutionize the industry, create the future. However, to us, culture is a large part of enjoying every single day as you go along the journey. It's in our mind, it is passion, innovation, caring. They're our core values. It's bringing on people that are like-minded, are excited about where we believe we can take the industry and our impact on the industry. We use that for hiring. We use that throughout our day-to-day operations as a business. We have several rituals that we do, the way that we interact with our employees. So for us, it almost becomes our operating system. It becomes the way in which we move from where we are today to where we ultimately want to be. And we ensure that we enjoy the journey and that we surround ourselves with like-minded people. As McDonald's used to say, it's the secret sauce. And it is something that we embrace really from the very beginning of hiring employees, to letting employees go if we ever get there. We actually have a very, very high retention rate. But it really is our operating system. So maybe I'll pause there if that made sense.
No, it did. And I'm curious, it sounds like it starts right from the beginning, right? So they, like with any good project, and it's the pre-construction phase, it's the collaboration phase, it's the sourcing out your supply chain phase, it's building a good culture. It seems like the evidence is there no matter who you kind of speak to, whichever corner of the industry they're in. If they have a few tools, right?
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say another big element for us, and I'm sure a lot of companies, and this is irrelevant of size. I think it should span all businesses. Very much a firm believer of being able to articulate your company's why. I mentioned core values already. I do think the number one thing that we have done, and it is probably the most important thing that we have done as it relates to our business, is to articulate our why. So, we work in an industry, you and I and others that are listening to this podcast, we work in an industry that really touches everybody on the planet. Everybody lives in a house, works in an office, are in or out of coffee shops and restaurants. We touch everybody. And at Beck Tech, I mentioned we're a technology company, but we firmly believe that if we can help our customers, pre-construction estimators, schedulers, make better, more informed decisions throughout the life of the project, it will result in better projects. If we can build better projects, put more daylight into schools, put more beds into hospitals, we believe that we can make those buildings better. And by making them better, we impact everybody in a positive way on the planet. So, you and I were talking at the beginning about impact and feeling like you're making a difference. I kind of liken what we're trying to do as make the world a better place. And when I talk to people before they've joined Beck Tech, I want to make sure that resonates, because if it doesn't, it doesn't matter if you have passion, innovation, and caring. If you don't line up with our why, it's probably not the right environment for you, the right industry for you. So to me, that's the number one piece. The second thing is those core values. So being able to articulate what is it that lines your people up on a day-to-day basis. So for us, I mentioned passion. To me, passion is energy. You can hear it in a conversation with somebody, whether somebody has that energy day in, day out. There's ups and downs in construction. Everybody knows it. You have good days, big highs, and you have really bad days. That's the reality. But is your energy still there every single day to move the ball forward? So passion is a big thing for us. As a technology company, we are challenging the status quo. And I don't just mean in the industry. I want people to join Beck Tech that challenge everything that we do today. I want people to have the belief that tomorrow is going to be better than it was today, and look for ways to make it better than it was today, to challenge the status quo. And then the last one, caring, is caring for the industry, caring for our customers, and caring for your fellow employees. And I believe if you have those three ingredients and you buy into our why, with a lot of the systems we have in place, we're going to have a hell of a lot of fun moving along this journey, and we will make the world a better place.
That's pretty strong. Like, I wanted to touch upon that first point you raised. It's in our world here as publications that cover the industry. You know, I've been a 23-year journalist. You know, I worked in big commercial papers here in the city and in the country. And so you're not, when you graduate journalism school, it's not like, I'm going to go write for a construction newspaper, right? So I found that point that I would explain, especially with our younger staff, when we would hire them, that you're covering an industry that touches you as soon as you wake up in the morning. When you swing your feet out of bed and flick that first switch, construction's touched your life 3 or 4 different ways. And that is your responsibility as the one who covers this industry, right?
Yeah.
Telling the stories, talking about the influence, the challenges, right? Of how this industry contributes, right? It's not just getting stuck in traffic because of construction. You know, the way people look at the stigmas of it and the issues around it. It's like, there is a lot of good positivity, the way you describe it. That's why I was excited to talk to you for this podcast. There's a lot of leaders I find now that look at construction that way, a lot more than there used to be. Transferring that knowledge to your industry, to your staff, do you find that that's challenging? But is it?
Oh, it's 100% is challenging. But I mentioned an operating system, so I think there's a certain set of beliefs that you look for, and then I think there are tools and practices and rituals that you build around your core values and your why that enable you to transfer that belief system, so to speak, to your employees. And so there's a lot wrapped up in that. So, for example, we have, and we revisit it every single year, a strategic plan. So the strategic plan, we challenge every year, you know, our why. Is it still relevant? And from there, to be successful, to revolutionize the industry, what would success look like? And we try and put that into something that our employees can connect with. So what does revolutionize the industry is a big, grand term. What does it really mean when rubber meets road? So we have a goal that 50% of all projects in North America utilize our platform. And we have some metrics that we share with our employees to show what that would translate to in terms of numbers of users and numbers of projects. Below that, we then start to say, well, what would our 3-year roadmap look like? Where do we want to be 3 years from now? So if in 10 years, we want to be at 50% of the industry, where do we want to be 3 years from now? And we start painting pictures around what would the industry look like if we were able to get to where we think we can get in 3 years. So it might be 8%, 10% of the industry. And then every year we're updating our yearly plan to line up with, it's almost like stepping stones. So we when about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, we used a system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it sort of has a few foundational elements. This idea of very clearly articulating, you know, your why, where you want to be, then having a 10-year with numbers, a 3-year with numbers and pictures, mental pictures, and then a 1-year strategic plan. So we do that. We still do that. We then use technology to enable our employees to set quarterly goals. I mentioned in the green room that we use a system called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results. It's up to the employees to figure out what their objectives are that line up with the company plan, and then to work with their manager to set attainable, but somewhat challenging key results, metrics, KPIs. And then we have systems that we have on a regular basis. So any employee that is managed by any employee that manages other employees is required as a manager to do weekly one-to-ones with their employees. There's typically 3 elements to a one-to-one. There's a personal section, there's a professional section, and then there's a professional development section. We use a product called 15.5 for tracking that those get done. We record those. We have mentoring and coaching sessions with managers. I'm layering on a lot here.
No, I was just going to ask, what's interesting there on that back end, and some people have brought it up, the one-on-ones and that personal contact with your staff, especially right now where quite a few people have mobilized having staff at home. How has the Beck experience been around that since March, essentially? Like, how have you guys tackled that component of maintaining that part of your business?
Yeah, so we have, most of our employees are in Dallas. We have a few remote employees. We have one in Jackson, Mississippi. We have another one in Virginia. So we have some remote employees, but the vast majority of our 60 plus employees are here in Dallas. We have always had groups that have had people that, Wednesday they're going to work from the house. We had never pre-COVID had the entire business working remotely. And it was intimidating when we made the decision, and it happened. I'm sure everybody's got a similar story. It seemed to happen very, very quickly for us. It was, I think a Friday I knew I had a couple of teams that were out on the road. Monday, I think I saw something over the weekend about this COVID thing on the West Coast, and I put 2 and 2 together that they're going there. And end of the day, Monday, we put a travel ban in place. And then by Wednesday, everybody was remote. And it was very, very intimidating. But what I found was we put a few additional, we don't have many rules at Beck Tech, but we put a few rules in place that you and I described before. We're going to use Zoom. We've actually subsequently also moved to Teams. We use Zoom for external. We use Teams for internal.
Yes.
But we put some rules in place around cameras up, hands off the keyboard. So when you're in a meeting, you need to be engaged in the meeting. One of the fears I had was, people showing up, but really it's a waste of time. I don't want that. I don't believe in that. I believe if you call a meeting, there needs to be a purpose and there needs to be an expected outcome. And I also believe that people that are invited to come need to participate. So, cameras up, hands off the keyboard. Those are some of the rules. We also had some existing meetings that we do internally that lended themselves working remotely just as well as they did in person. So, for example, different groups do different things, but most groups do daily stand-ups. What did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? Did you run into any challenges? Very, very quick 10, 15-minute huddle. It gets everybody on the same page. If there are any issues, you take those offline and you work one-on-one with whoever needs to be involved in the issues. We've also always done a weekly standing. So it's about a 15-minute company standing meeting. Each of the department heads will communicate any high-level information. We've also always done a weekly newsletter. Every Friday I send out, it's a Google Doc. Each of the departments go in, they fill in it's almost like a form letter. What are the deals that we're working for the quarter? How are we doing with customer happiness? How are we doing with product releases? That kind of stuff. And then I'll put together an email that kind of wraps everything up. And then we also do we have a monthly cadence with some of our core value alignments. So we have something called Beck Tech Cares. It lines up with our care core value, caring core value,
right,
where employees nominate other employees when they see an employee exhibiting that core value. And then once a month, we'll have a company lunch, and we'll go through all the nominations from their from their fellow employees, and anybody that we think is deserving, we'll give a small donation to them that they then in turn give to a charity of their choice. So we've really been set up for this even pre-COVID. And what I've actually found is the only major difference is sort of what you and I are doing today. Instead of it being in person, it's video.
Right.
But the cadence is the same, the conversations are the same, and then these rules, these limited set of rules, have really, I think, helped tremendously. And we do track productivity. Our productivity's gone up with the additional flexibility. So
I was going to say, no, it really does sound like the platform was kind of set already for this kind of these working parameters. And I had to chuckle to myself, not too loud, not to chuckle over you, but when you were talking about what's changed and people are talking about meetings, and I know our personal experience from the newsroom, not all Construct Connects, but just us, those first few weeks, like the amount of Teams meetings we were having. Right? It's like, oh, we got to have a meeting because we're all working from home. How's it going? What are the issues? Like we were just meeting ourselves to death because at times there weren't actually points. It was just almost this, you just wanted to reach out and make sure everybody was okay, right? So now there's a different cadence, right?
Yeah, that's
go
the
ahead.
key word. I think and the key word is cadence. Like I did the same thing the first probably month. Every single day. It wasn't every employee. With the size that I have this luxury that I can do this. I picked up the phone. I'd pick up the phone and talk to 4 or 5 people. How are you doing? Anybody in the family affected? How's the wife doing? How are you managing the kids and the kids being at home with both of you working?
Right.
I think that stuff was important. But then I think after the first month, it's very much, it reverted back to the way that it was, in the way that I think in our case, it was working, and it lent itself to this remote working environment. In fact, one of the stories I was telling somebody just this morning was we actually moved into a new office space last November. We went from a very small office to a very big office with the plans to grow. And we've continued to grow through 2020, but I'm actually regretting taking the lease out on the office. Not because the office is bad, but just because of how successful we have been working remotely.
Right.
I think we would have been better off just coming to the office a couple times a week on a go forward basis. Instead, now we have this really, really nice big office building with a long-term lease. So I think hindsight is a wonderful thing, I guess.
Sure. And I remember that too. I remember the first, when we were doing our check-ins with our management team, and, they're like, how are your staff doing? How's work? How's productivity? And the one answer I consistently had was, I'm blessed by this, is because I have a team of journalists. Yeah. Right? We're used to reporting from the most uncomfortable places, right? From like rickety little chairs in hotel lobbies, trying to type out something, or trying to find a Wi-Fi at a coffee shop to file, right? I'm like, you have to understand, my team right now, this is like, hey, I know the Wi-Fi is reliable. I have the chair that I want. I can execute as much as you need me to. And so that was never really one of my bigger concerns as a leader. It was more the what you touched upon, those little kind of moments where, how's your family? How are things going? I was so used to just walking over to somebody's desk to do that, or with my team in BC, that was always a phone call or Microsoft Teams. That's kind of the silver lining there, because we have 2 newspapers in 2 different provinces, 2 publications. It was like the BC guys and I were already used to this cadence of checking in on Teams and, hey, picking up the phone if we have to. But so it was a very natural transition to the COVID times that we're in now.
So, something else that we have done that's also been very good for us is, I mentioned this 15-5 platform earlier. And one of the things that we do with our employees is every Friday they have to go online and fill in basically some updates on where you are with your OKRs for the quarter. What are the high-level things that you've been working on throughout the week? But more important than that is there's something they call the pulse. And the pulse is a 1 to 5, 5 being, hey, I feel on top of the world, 1 being underneath the world is on my shoulders. And we've historically tracked that by department. And in those one-to-ones with our employees, we try and support our employees. So it becomes a real, if 1 week you're a 4 and the next week you're a 2, something's going on. It can be professional, it can be personal. Obviously, trust is required when it comes to personal. We don't obviously beat anybody over the head. If you don't want to tell us, that's fine. But one of the big things for us is trust, and building trust enables us to help our employees, whether that be us going and talking to our HR group and getting them some professional help, whether that be some advice, or whether that be go take some PTO. That has really helped. And what I found in my one-to-ones throughout COVID, there's ups and downs on the personal side. I feel great. Lots of good things are happening. I'm enjoying the time with my kid and my wife, all the way down to my kid's sick. And my wife and I are both trying to work, and it's challenging. So I've actually found that pulse a great way of, well, help me help you, with advice or with coaching or HR or whatever. And that's something I've really enjoyed, having that tool at my disposal to have a conversation with an employee around how I can help them, which at the end of the day is my job, in my opinion. It's
right.
I'm surrounded by wonderful people. My job is just to help them achieve what I know they're capable of achieving, remove the barriers.
So what would your recommendation be as we kind of get close to wrapping up? It's uncertain times. We don't know. We can all surmise listening to data about how long this is going to continue, how are we ever going to go back to any type of normal that we once recognized.
Mm-hmm.
What would your advice or key points for folks in the industry that are still grappling with this? How do I communicate with my staff effectively right now doing this?
Yeah.
Like, what should their approach be? Maybe what are the little granular things they should start with, to kind of explore the longer path, which we're all on collectively.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that sort of jumped into my mind when you said that. One of the things my mother always used to tell me growing up, worry about the things you can control. The things that you can't control, you want to be aware of. You don't want to be the guy or girl with their head in the sand, but you want to focus on the things you can control and execute on those to the best of your ability. So, I would look at every day, what do you need to do to move your element of the business forward, and do you control it? And if you control it, execute. So that's the first thing. The second thing that came into my mind is, I think this element of personalization, recognizing that we're going through this together, and it's okay to have a conversation with your employees around how they feel. I know historically construction is not really a touchy-feely kind of industry. It's a sort of boots, rubber meets road kind of industry. But I think as human beings, it is healthy to express your concerns and understand your employees' concerns. And if you can control it, help them get through it. I also think the other big thing, if you have not done this, be able to articulate where you ultimately want to be as a business. It's sort of like the GPS, the map. If you don't know the destination, you'll never get there. So I firmly believe, understand where you want to get to, help your employees understand where you want to get to, and then control day in, day out what you want to get done tomorrow, and not worry about the things you can't control. I know there was lots of soft and fluffy things, but to me, that's the name of the game right now, is don't get overwhelmed with the things you can't control. Focus on executing. I still go back to, it is unprecedented times, but it is such an impactful industry, and that will not change. Mm-hmm. And I think focus on the positive. There's a lot of them out there, and we are making a difference as an industry, and we will continue to make a difference. You just got to find out how you can make a difference tomorrow.
Yep, exactly. Perfect, Stewart. Well, with our listeners, I hope you enjoy that. If you have any questions for Stewart or myself, you can always just email editor@dailycommercialnews.com. If you want to reach out to Stewart directly, Stewart, is okay if I share your email with the listeners?
You betcha. Yep.
Yeah, it's Stewart Carroll at beck-technology.com. Feel free to reach out to either of us. Once again, Stewart, really enjoyed it from the green room right here to the end. I wish all the conversations went like that. And normally they do, previous interviewees. Just saying.
Don't dig a hole.
Yeah, before I start digging, exactly. There's the construction analogies coming out again. But
Well, Vince,
All right.
thank you very much for allowing me to participate today. I really have enjoyed the conversation, both before and during.
Okay, same here, Stuart. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Hello, everyone. Vince Versace joining you again for some parting thoughts on the Stewart Carroll interview you just heard and a look ahead to next week's podcast. For me, that interview with Stewart boils down to 3 words. How are you? Asking that question is probably your first step into building a positive work culture, a supportive work culture, and also showing your stripes as a leader. Being authentic in asking that question, being authentic in listening to the answer, whether you provide a solution or not, is key. These are scary times, thanks to COVID-19. And we as leaders in the industry, and as just colleagues and peers, never mind the leadership titles that we have, we need to listen to each other. We need to ask each other how we're doing, because none of us have ever faced what's happening right now. And there's no really definitive end to this at the moment. So remember to ask, how are you? I'll get off my soapbox as it concerns that and now talk about next week's episode of the Construction Record podcast. That episode is going to feature a conversation I had with Luis Vidal, Spanish-based architect, world-renowned for his architectural design of airports. And I talked to Luis about designing the airport of the future post-COVID-19. It was a really interesting conversation because airports are the gateways of nations, gateways to the world. And typically we know there's a heavy security element with airports, and we know that gets incorporated in the design somewhere along the way. But now throw in the restrictions and parameters that COVID-19 brings now and after, let's say a vaccine comes, what are the impacts to airport design? And talking to Luis was really insightful. It was very interesting because he has some really interesting ideas around designing for silent new technology, planning for spaces with maximum flexibility, incorporating culture and light to reduce stress, remembering that sustainability remains critical in your design and building, and how to use big data. We covered a lot. So I hope you look forward to listening to that conversation with Luis next week. And as it concerns today's podcast, thank you so much for listening. Take care. Thank you.